Orgasmic enlightenment, where the sexual and spiritual come together. I'm Kim Anami, and I'm a holistic sex and relationship coach and a vaginal weightlifter. In this show, we explore all things intimate. I believe that our sexual energy is life force, creative energy, and we can use it to shape our worlds, strengthen our relationships, and self-actualize. I blend the most avant-garde information from neuroscience, ancient sexual practices like Tantra and Taoism, to renegade wellness modalities to show you how to create gourmet sex in your lives. Come one, come all. Everyone is creative. Just ask your vagina. Sexual energy equals life force energy. This is the energy that creates new life. And if you aren't creating babies with it, then you can use this energy consciously as a way to shape and manifest in your life. This is the ultimate creative power of the universe, and it flows through you. Instead of tuning into this and riding this wave, most people are totally oblivious to and disconnected from and have disowned this power. And all of my work is about helping you to get it back. One of the common myths out there about creativity and sexuality is that some people have it and some people don't. Some people are just born creative and others not so much. Some people just have a high libido and others not so much. First off, creativity isn't only limited to what people might think of as traditionally creative pursuits like art and painting, drawing, sculpting, writing. To me, creativity is bringing a stroke of genius and innovation, a way of approaching something completely differently into whatever it is that you're doing. You could be a creative genius at kickboxing, at gardening, at creating novel undergarments like Spanx and period panties, inventing the concept of the boutique hotel. There are plenty of disruptors in all areas. People who go against the grain. They find unique solutions to problems, and they do things in a way that no one has done before. Creativity means breaking out of the status quo with a surge of inspiration and being a wrench in the gears. The etymology of the word inspiration has elements of spirit in it, as in the immediate influence of God, sudden creativity in artistic production. We open ourselves up to the divine and to the flow of life. We are able to rise above the ruts and patterns of the mind that we might get stuck in and open to something greater and touch its brilliance and let it touch us. And this is the key. We have to open to it. The process of accessing this creative genius through your sexual energy is twofold. One, simply by connecting to your sexual life force, this creative substance now begins taking form, direction, and action in your life. And two, by learning how to open and surrender sexually, you are opening yourself up to the divine and to the flow of life. Over the years of working with people, I have been able to see the correlation between stuck sexual energy and then them being stuck in their lives. And it shows up like clockwork. Whether they have been single or coupled, if they were sexually stagnant, everything else in their lives was too. From their intimate relationship to the extra weight they were carrying on their bodies that they just couldn't seem to lose, to their vocation and cash flow, all of it was connected. Their sexual energy was the source, infusing vitality and the Midas touch into every part of their lives. Or if they were disconnected from it, then it was acting like a vortex, sucking everything else into it. No one would ever make the connection until they started to get their sex lives back on track. And then they would see. They would drift away from a job they'd had for years that they were subsisting and kind of dying in, and gravitate towards work that was fulfilling for them on an authentic level. Their intimate relationship would become a source of joy, fun, support, and pleasure. Their children who had been acting out were now reflecting the harmony of their parents because they felt safe and secure in the overarching container of love that their parents now provided for them as opposed to the leaky vessel that they were before. The extra weight that they had been carrying for years that exercise and healthy eating just couldn't seem to touch was now being combusted away by the power of their cataclysmic fucking. All of this sourced from the creative and transformative powers of their genitals. Because your sexual energy is your creative DNA genetic blueprint, when you connect to it and it becomes the fuel for your life, everything you touch then begins to be a truer reflection of your deepest self. The decisions you make are guided by this innate truth and knowingness. You have now touched the secret of the universe, the creative power that lives between your legs, and you have it at your disposal. Now, do you understand why sex is censored? Why its true meaning and power are distorted and hidden from you? Because you are unstoppable when you are fully inhabiting it. Hashtag powered by vagina. I often use the phrase hashtag powered by vagina to show how my sexual energy has created my world. Even if you read every manifesting book, I would say that you'll still be stuck making these ideas and making your ideas real out in the world if you are disconnected from your sexual power source. It is the engine and the battery that sends your ideas out into the universe. I credit everything I've created consciously over the past 15 or so years with my vagina. I had a couple of pivotal life shifts, both 20 and 15 years ago, where I faced my own demons and reclaimed control over my sexual energy to be able to own it and direct it consciously in the world. Since then, my life, for the most part, is a reflection of all that I want for myself. I got conscious about my highest visions and dreams, and I orgasmed them into reality. Remember, this is your procreative energy. You have control over it, and you can shape it, or else it gets shaped for you. When you disown your sexual power, you disown your creative power. This is a great quote I like from Brene Brown. Unexpressed creativity is not benign, it metastasizes. That's because there is always a cost to not expressing your truth, your voice, your power, your essence. We might think that we can get away with swallowing these things and suppressing them, but they always come out somewhere, just like with our sexual energy. If you suppress it, all that happens is that it comes out in and on the body or in some other mutated way. Just ask Catholic schoolboys. The parallel between sexual and creative expression is enormous, and really they both inform each other. The more that you get turned on in bed, the more you get turned on in life. And the more you get turned on in life, you feel that flow and you allow yourself to receive pleasure and good things, then the more responsive and aroused you are in bed. It all comes together. Stifling sexual energy has the same result as stifling creative energy. I see it all the time, where the genitals become the repository of repressed sexual energy as they wear all of the unresolved, unprocessed stuff that is still hanging around the system. All of the following mutations are symptoms of stuck sexual energy, and I call them mutations because I do not believe that these are normal states of expression. I believe that they are an imbalance of it. For example, low libido, menstrual, PMS, and menopausal issues, lack of orgasms, depression, lethargy, aimlessness in life, financial plateau, growths and blockages in the reproductive organs, breasts, ovaries, uteruses, all these symbols of sexuality. People get so cut off from this energy that these body parts literally get cut out of them. Weight gain, urinary incontinence, pelvic organ prolapse. And the signs of a lack of creative expression are similar. Things like depression, lethargy, blocked up emotions, blocked up everything. So creativity is the sense of opening yourself up to the flow of life. Sexuality is the same. You are open to being penetrated by life, by love, by your lover. So how do we open? How do we tap into the sexual creative flow, which is ultimately the abundance of the universe? How do you activate your vagina so that it becomes the mover, shaker, and creativity maker that it is meant to be? First off, resensitize it. I talk a lot about the weak and numb vagina. If your vagina is in this condition, and most women's are, then you aren't connected to it or to any of its pleasure and creative forces. In order to tap into this creative power, you gotta own that pussy. And the two most powerful ways that I teach to awaken your vagina are, first off, yoni massage, loving, healing, and awakening, a vaginal reconnaissance to get to know your innermost self, to release past trauma and to bring sensation and pleasure back into the vagina, and the jade yoni egg. As the best tool for vaginal strengthening on the market, the yoni egg is your activator and orgasm maker. It helps you in the same way that yoni massage does, but it takes that even further to build muscle tone, to give you bigger, better orgasms, the ability to ejaculate, to lubricate like a tsunami and to make your vagina live in exquisite ecstasy. The second thing I recommend is to have deeper, more powerful, life-changing orgasms. This is a bit of a catch-22 because you need to have an awakened vagina to experience these deeper vaginal orgasms, and the more of them you have, the more you bring your vagina and yourself back to life. The vaginal orgasms, G-spot, cervical, and ejaculatory, as opposed to the more, I say paltry clitoral counterparts, they rewire you, they recalibrate you, they reset you back to your original self, minus the programming and layers of civilizing that we all take on over our lifetimes. You get in touch with your inner voice, your true nature, and the gifts that you have to give to the world, your dharma. And this is how and why people often change their life paths when they get in touch with their sexual energy. More of their true self now bubbles out of them, unstoppable, and begins directing their lives. And thirdly, I would say getting into your feminine flow, learning how to receive. How much do you let good things in? Are you willing to receive love, abundance, deep orgasms, and a life of daily pleasure and good things happening to you? For some people, their wiring is otherwise. They are wired for chaos and strife and struggle, often because it's what they grew up with. It's imprinted in their nervous system, and so they gravitate towards it as adults, unless they change the wiring. And this is one of the greatest gifts of your sexual energy and the deeper vaginal orgasms. They rewire you. They help you to reset. This is honestly one of the most powerful discoveries that I have had in having vaginal orgasms, and in particular cervical orgasms early on in my sexual exploration, is finding this as a gift and finding myself emerging out of these sexual experiences with a sense of self-actualization. I remember I'd been studying Maslow's work, this was way back in the day, and learning about it and feeling like this is self-actualization. I would come out of these cervical orgasms, walk out into the world, and just feel like this cleaner, clearer, more grounded, centered, powerful, rejuvenated version of me, of my true self. And that honestly was one of the real beacons for me in following this path of studying and then teaching around sexuality, was this deeper recalibration, self-realization gift of it done in this conscious way, in this deeper way, and in the cervical orgasm way. So the whole feminine receptive idea of magnetizing things to you becomes heightened. Things fall into your lap because that's what attracted it. And so rather than slogging hard and feeling like you have to work your ass off, which are typically more masculine expressions of achieving in the world, you cultivate your orgasms, you cultivate your vaginal sentience. I'm serious. This is the path. So you enliven your sensual energy, your feminine capacity to receive all good things, pleasure, cock, the deeper orgasms, abundance, and even literal cash. And all of this stems from your creative power source, your vagina. For today's Well Fucked All-Star segment, we have not one, not two, but three All-Stars sharing how they have shaped their lives with their vaginas. I have a couple of short clips from Mara and Robin about their vaginas, orgasms, and creativity, and then I have a longer interview with Rose on her sexual evolution and how she has created her life from her vagina. Well Fucked All-Stars. Here's Mara.
My sex drive was like akin to my drive in my life. So like if I had low sex drive, I also had a low life drive. Like I wasn't super excited about life. And so the two go hand in hand. I don't know for everybody, but for me. And so I needed, when I said like I needed this, it was mostly because just the results in my daily life that I wasn't happy with. And so I knew that like if I could nail this, then I would be happier in my regular life. And like it's absolutely true. Like all of this work that I've been doing sexually and personally has transformed into my daily life. Like I've just opened a bakery and it's becoming very successful. I've started hosting monthly women's circles and having really great results with that. And these are things that I never had the drive to do before. And I never thought, especially with, children, that I had the time and energy to do. But like I hosted my first big bakery event when my baby was a week old. Like who does that?
Oh
and
my
I was
gosh.
just like, I was super like, let's do this. I made 100 cinnamon rolls and like, and we had a great time. And everybody was like, I can't believe you're doing this. And I was like, oh yeah, that's right. This is not normal. Like, and it's because I was having orgasms. Like, I was like, I have the energy. And so I'm going to use that energy to do what I want to do. It's fantastic.
This is so epic because, you're talking about, you started the salon, let's say 8 months pregnant, right? So you've got maybe 4 weeks or so before you have your baby. You're having, you said you gave birth 5 weeks early.
I did.
Holy moly,
I gave
just
birth
a week into the salon.
Like a week into the salon. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So you'd only been doing this work for like what, 2 to 3 weeks?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, you really are a vaginal and epic superstar. So you're doing this work for a few weeks. It says here, I'm just reading some of the stuff that you've written, because you only had clitoral orgasms in the past, and then you had and even those were few and far between. And then you had your first cervical orgasm on your birthday when your baby was 6 weeks old.
Yeah. It was pretty exciting. I did not know what to expect because I didn't know what a cervical orgasm was. So I'm like sobbing and he was like, are you okay? I'm like, I think so. And then I just sobbed for like 20 minutes. And then I was like, that was amazing. I am changed. So yeah, that was a pretty good birthday present.
That was a very beautiful birthday present that you allowed yourself to have. I love it that you gave to yourself. And now you're in a place where you can have like 5 cervical orgasms in one session.
And now I'm like welcoming him in, right? With my just extremely gushing pussy. Like, can I say that? Is that too, you say things like that.
You can 100%
but
say
like,
that.
Cool. So yeah, it was just like I don't know. Okay, I'm trying to find the best word to describe this. So it was like once my pussy was online, she was offline pretty much my whole life. Once she was online, she was like ready and gushing, and I'm almost wet all the time now. Like I don't know. Like, I don't know how else can I say that?
You've said it. And that's how I describe it for people, is that they get to a place where they are wet all the time. And because they're just so, like, if we look at the pussy metaphorically, like this idea of being receptive to life, right? Being receptive to being penetrated by life or being penetrated by cock,
Yeah.
is that then the metaphor is we embody that in this full way, that then the pussy is sort of always open, always available, always ready, right? And that's how we become towards life, like the way you described about having these intimate connections and moments with anyone, right? With strangers, with people you meet out in the world, that there's just that deeper level of openness and capacity for intimacy. And then it's both in the psyche, in the emotions, in the heart, and in the pussy. And so because of that, the pussy is on this perpetual like place of being
Right.
wet and ready.
Can I share a funny story about that?
Absolutely, you can.
So, okay. So, I was like, this is probably a few weeks ago. I was like, honey, I need sex basically all the time. And he's like, I just can't keep up with you. Like, and so I was kind of frustrated. I was like, I'm kind of frustrated, at this. And he was like, well, I don't know what else to do, and so I started to like realize what's going on with me? Like, why am I just like hungry all the time? Why am I never satisfied? But then I started like tuning into my pussy and realizing that she is just like throbbing constantly. Like she's just awake, alive, and hungry all of the time. And I was like, well, I don't necessarily need sex all of the time. And so I started sort of breathing in that energy because I was getting frustrated. I was like, I am angry. I need sex like all the time. But I started kind of breathing in that energy like you teach us to do, and using it towards creativity, towards other things. And it's really funny. It's kind of calmed down that like frustration and that like intense all the time drive, but realizing that like, oh, this is what it feels like to have a turned on pussy all the time. Like I'm driving down the street, I'm in a grocery store. Like, is there something wrong with me? No, this is just what it feels like. And so I'm really getting used to that feeling. And it's such a wonderful feeling to just feel turned on all the time.
And here's Robin. So when you were talking about this lower chakra stuff, and so what do you think that you overall as a well-fucked woman has done for the rest of your life? So obviously I would say your own confidence in your body, in yourself, especially being told that you can't do these things, right? You're of a certain age, you have a certain condition, you just can't, don't worry about it. It's just, that's the way it is. And then your whole being is like, no, I got this. I have been victorious in these areas. And then, so I would, that would breed a level of confidence and unstoppability, in a woman, as it tends to. But how, in addition to that in your life, how else do you think these extra layers of really deep, powerful cervical orgasms have really changed you and your expression out in the world?
Oof. That's a big one. I mean, it has changed so much for me, honestly. And it has like a pretty incredible ripple effect. I really believe, it's funny when you talk about like the fukme and if I'm starting to get in in a bad mood, my husband will look at me and be like, do you have a case of fukme? Or just being able to identify it. And, it's all funny in a very like personal way, of what I'm experiencing, but also how it affects just the way we interact as humans. And, I think I said in one of the feedback things, I talked about the spiritual aspect to me, which is also a very kind of huge, broad thing to like sort of explain. But I really believe that this piece that you're teaching to women and to men, and that a few other teachers, that are touching on it, it's like the one missing thing for humans that in our spirituality. And I'm an artist, and I moved starting with your course. It like shifted my whole desire of what I was doing. And it was more of being able to try to give pleasure to women through a second skin. And the interactions that I was able to have with women on that level, just because of what you had been teaching me. So I was more rooted in my pleasure. I mean, I had women in tears telling me the most beautiful, like vulnerable stories, being like, why am I talking about this? Or then getting dressed and being like, I've never felt this good. And like, I mean, it was so, so rewarding. And I mean, in the same way that obviously your journey of like finding your own pleasure and then learning to share that with other people, it's that ripple effect. I mean, that's it. It not only is it my personal life changing of being able to have orgasms, but the ripple effect of affecting other people in your spectrum, whatever your work may be. I mean, I didn't think I was going to feel like a healer by dressing women with certain, designs and clothing, but they just end up expressing their innermost dreams because it starts that conversation. And that feels really amazing. I mean, honestly, I feel like if everybody was forced to go to a school like yours, 18, you're out, screw college, you gap year, everybody has to go and learn about their vaginas and their cocks. I think that we'd be a happier world. I mean, truly. I truly believe that. And it's pretty awesome to see the immediate effects, like the more you work here, the more it's reflected in the people that you meet.
And it just infuses out of you. You become this vehicle and channel for this energy of sensuality and owning yourself and creativity, because I always talk about the connection between sex and creativity. And what have you noticed with that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, absolutely. I bought myself I think I mentioned this to you at some point, but I had bought a Art Nouveau 1800s hand mirror. Like, I imagine that it was held by a courtesan. And so I would go into my studio and I'd pussy gaze and I'd talk to my pussy before I'd start painting these clothes for women, and when I started coming up, like Artemis was one of the goddesses that I worked on with this summer. And that was like kind of infused in my clothing. And I would just sit there and I swear like the effect that it had, because nobody thinks about it. Like clothing is a second skin and nobody, you just like go shopping at Target and you're like, who cares? But when you wear your second skin and you're recognizing that you are portraying a piece of yourself, and for me to be able to like watch that on women and see women, they'd be in their little polo shirts and their jeans, because I'm from the Northeast. So like, that's how women dress. And then they put on like, this organic dress and be like, oh my God, and I felt so good being able to share that creative juice, because it is like super juicy. And it's very obvious when you're disconnected, because I've actually had the experience after your salon. I went through some like really, really challenging times with my teenage son and so much drama, and I fell off the wagon, so to speak. And it was kind of amazing to see, with the lack of practice, with the lack of like breast massage and the lack of I had my first bad period right after. Like I'd had 2 or 3 months of just sailing, and then all of a sudden stopped the practice, and didn't want to have sex because it was so angry. Like, my husband kept looking at me, he's like, I think Kim would tell you. It's like, Jesus. But it's incredible to see the effects, and it's a whole realm of self-care that most of us don't know about, like you think that you're just having sex to connect with a person, but it's so much more than that. So much more.
And now we will hear from Rose. Hello, Rose. Thank you for being here as a well-fucked all-star.
Hi, Kim. Thank you so much for having me.
So, yes.
I'm very excited and thankful to be on this call with you, and so thankful and appreciative for all of your teachings and all of the beautiful influence that you've had in my life.
My pleasure. I'm always happy to be part of this journey with people. So let's chat about some of your evolution over time in studying this work and the impact that it's had on your life. And there's certain things that you've shared with me that I'm going to throw out here, and then I'd love to hear you elaborate more on them. And so I know that in diving into this work and exploring a more conscious approach to your sexuality, you've had changes in your relationship, you've had changes in the relationship to yourself, in your work life, in your overall life. And so this is really about showing people what happens when you do sync up with and become conscious of and the director of your sexual energy, and the changes that that shows in all areas of your life. So yes, your intimate relationship has improvements and evolution, but also every part of your existence. So let's start with your relationship. So you had talked about having sex, maybe on average 1 to 3 times a week, and then going to more than daily. So tell me about that change.
Well, I think I'll start off by saying that my relationship was good, and really, has always been, I think, what I would describe as good, and with a strong chemistry and passion between us, and really always had radical honesty and emphasis on connection, and on our friendship really being more important than our relationship, at least in terms of loving each other more than we need each other, and all of those good fundamentals. I think it's often surprised me that sex wasn't always perfect, even though it always was very good, and that took work. I think I just always assumed that that it wasn't an area in which we should focus energy and attention, which obviously seems so strange when I would put that towards everything else, but that it should just always be perfect, without any, tending or learning, or and without really giving it time and space. And I think, your sort of basic recommendations about, weekends or times away, or just consciously focusing time and attention there, it seems so simple and obvious, but took a little changing of habits and of practices, and has been so worthwhile. I think when we kind of leave it for weekends, or when we're not working and the kids aren't needing us and other people in our life aren't needing us, and sort of last at the end, then it kind of becomes last. And it was always starting over again from the beginning, or sort of for me, what feels like a point of kind of zero, zero velocity, and kind of needing to establish that connection and kind of make some progress. And when that happens only on weekends, it's hard to build progress and to really get to the really good places. And I think for me, I've noticed a very clear 3 to 4 day limit. If I go that long without, then I'm sort of starting from scratch again, and kind of living life from a different place, which is how I often lived it before, to one where there's just so much more energy to go around, and joy and creativity and ease. Sort of the ease versus balance, or versus struggle balance, is much nicer. I guess I'm straying from the question, and the effects on our relationship is that we're not working so hard to come to a point of pleasure and connection. We're always there, and that point just gets deeper and deeper, or higher and higher, and there's this reservoir of passion and of energy and of support and sort of juice and sustenance that we can offer each other. and then share out into the world. So it seems like our relationship is of so much more service to each other and to our families and to our, our patients and our work and our communities.
I love that. And the idea that you become this source of sustenance for each other is really the core of my work, is that we plug into each other. And I think what you said earlier is very true for most people, is that they, particularly because of the messaging or lack of messaging that we have in our culture, where it's this like, oh, your relationship should magically just work in some way, and you don't really have to tend to it and nurture it and put energy into it, and then people are shocked when it falls apart, or becomes less enjoyable, rather than consciously looking at it like anything else that needs time and love and attention. Yeah. So what would you say then? I mean, you've also mentioned that your cervical orgasm quotient has increased. So tell us about that.
Sure. I think I'm still a little shy talking about about these things. I think I've had cervical orgasms previously in my life, but never. They sort of came, when I was lucky, or sometimes irregularly, and not that frequently, like maybe a few times a year, and were sort of these mysterious joys, and being able to sort of have them regularly, and like you say, use them as tools in my healing, and in the kind of processing of old stuff, and just sort of the daily maintenance is a real game changer. I found most of what you teach to be extremely true and powerful, but among them is the connection between the cervix and the heart. And kind of hallmark of cervical orgasms for me is a heart opening and feeling like, like my vagina reaches up to my heart, and everything in between those spaces is clear and freely flowing and moving, and that my heart can be open to my partner, to the world, really, and that I'm able to love and accept and turn towards whatever whatever is so much easier. I think about that a lot as sort of a practice for living, is accepting and welcoming and falling in love with what is and what comes to me, and the blessings, the opportunities, the challenges, and more myself. And that is a beautiful tool to help me be in that state of openness, and to turning towards something that feels challenging instead of turning away from it. So, these aren't practices that are unique to sex or to the way you teach the sexual practices, but empower them and go, so nicely with them.
And so what you mentioned about using cervical orgasms to process things, can you elaborate on that?
I think the process of approaching a cervical orgasm to me feels like doors opening. And sometimes like a corridor of lots of doors, and sometimes with mirrors on the doors, and like there's a tight spot, and if and he sort of stays on it, then that opens and releases, and there's kind of a new space or a new dimension, and then there's another door, and that one opens, and there's another one, and inside all of those are each of those tightnesses, sometimes it's just sort of vague, but very often is connected to, or either before or after the door opens, a memory or a feeling or a impression of something else that's happened, or just a feeling. It feels like clearing through this debris and these feelings and this sort of stored up, emotions or just reactions to what's happened in my life. I think there's been times, there's been some grief recently. A close friend of mine's son died at a young age, and which has been an opportunity to process all sorts of other loss, and the resistance to loss and the resistance to losing our children, especially. I think, to me, I've used that as an opportunity to kind of release attachment or just prepare for the death and that separation. Which I think is a worthwhile practice for us. And again, leaning into those hard things. And there's really, that pathway to cervical orgasms is such a useful path to be able to identify the things that get stuck in us that I might not have noticed were stuck there before, and release them. And I think I appreciate those practices. I'm also have a Wim Hof practice, and find that there's a similarity in there, sort of feeling that resistance and relaxing into it. But I think cervical orgasms and opening towards them is a wonderful method, a really uniquely powerful and fun method.
And I love the way you've articulated all of that with such depth and insight, because that's what, in my work, when I talk about the value of vaginal and especially cervical orgasms to liberate women, to help them to grow, to shed layers of stress, pain, trauma. It's one of the greatest, if not the greatest, personal growth tool that we have, as uniquely to us as women. And when people are really, clitoral orgasms, whatever, and I'm like, no. The good stuff is in the vagina. Like the life-changing orgasms are in the vagina. And once we learn how to utilize them and understand their true power, women don't go back, or they might still have clitoral orgasms, but they're just not there achieving the same thing. And
the best part about the best part about clitoral orgasms is sort of opening the way to the others.
Right. Right. Yeah, definitely. And that's how I usually frame them, as they're great appetizers, right? They're great to start to rev the engine up. They're just not the final destination. And that's the big myth and misinformation about them, is to frame them as though they are, right? And that's what then really does a disservice to women. So
I don't know if the cervical orgasms are honestly that pleasurable for me. It's kind of beyond pleasure. I think there's, it's more like a shift in the state of my being. And yes, there's pleasure, but that's not really the benefit of them, almost.
Well, I think on my journey, originally they were a process of cleansing for me. And so going into them, having them, was not in the same pleasure as a clitoral orgasm, but it had its own cleansing purpose. And then afterward is when I felt most of the pleasure, like after, like feeling like as though I'd had a really good cry. And then, then I felt bliss later on in my evolution, like after I think I cleared a lot of stuff and was able to use them as this really powerful tool. Then yes, they became full ecstasy and pleasure, but originally they were there to help me move through stuff that was stuck, lodged within me, the issues in our tissues, as Wim Hof says, one of my favorite phrases of his, that helped to move that stuff out of the way. And once that stuff was out of the way, then it opened the door for more pure pleasure. But before that, they were helping me to get rid of the debris and clear out the space.
Definitely.
So
I definitely agree.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
So you had also touched on this idea of falling in love with yourself, and that somehow through this process that turned a light onto the relationship that you had with yourself, and times when perhaps you would put others first and others' needs first, and that it brought you back to this place of putting yourself first and strengthening that relationship that you have with you.
I think that's been maybe one of the most surprising parts of my experience in the Well-Fucked Woman course. And, maybe I'll start that by saying that I decided to take the course, the moment I was like, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do this now, like this summer, a month or so before it started, I had been a little frustrated with my husband in our relationship for kind of failing your, 7-day or 30-day sex challenges. And so I decided to do one myself. There was, I think, a podcast that you had on the self-love challenge, and I failed it miserably, and, realized that, oh, this is not all his fault. His lack of commitment or, anything else, which I was kind of believing, that I'm a big part of this too. And if this is something I want, I need to, look to myself first and foremost, and look at why, like what's hard about this? Why wouldn't I do this? And I think the biggest answer that I found is, one that I'd come to in other places also, but not fully, a lack of loving myself. And, I think I always have had good self-esteem and being good to myself, and manifested, overall great relationships and great experiences. But definitely had limits there. And I think that was the biggest shift in the course, is falling in love with myself, which is something I hadn't even considered that I would do. Liked myself, good self-esteem, all those other things. But that's different to being in love with myself and kind of having a relationship with myself that was like courting or a courtship or sort of treating myself with that level of tenderness that I would give to my beloved. And this was something that I had been aware of since a mentor and a really beautiful person who exemplifies a life of service had said, had made a comment that we can't, we're limited in our ability to love others and how deeply we love ourselves, or how fully we love ourselves. And when he said it, it struck me, and I was surprised at how hard it hit me, because I thought, again, that I was loving myself. And so, had been shining like the light of my awareness on this. And, I guess just so many different ways that I realized that has been a theme for me. And the ways in which I had sought to change that. But when it comes to actually, physically loving myself and making love to myself, or trying to, deciding I would, and then kind of noticing myself kind of avoiding it, or having an immature relationship with myself. Like, I would think that I could go straight into self-pleasuring without connecting, deeply like I expect my partner to, or like I would, connect with him before we started touching each other. And that that I had so much to learn about being my own lover, and and sometimes it feels to me like I'm turning the lighthouse of my heart inwards. Like I am good, and my husband says that's sort of my unique superpower gift is in loving, and that I'm, really good at loving other people, but including myself in that love, which has been hard for me. I think that my family and maybe even my culture is very focused on loving the other more than the self. And it's actually been quite a theme in my relationship. My husband's really good at loving himself and putting himself first. And that was, I didn't think that was really the best way of living before. And I slowly learned that actually it is. And that, our ability to love ourselves really does enable us to love others more fully. And, this just keeps manifesting for me. And it's kind of been a challenge for me to accept and to live. Especially helpful in my ability to mother and in my relationship with my kids. And I think I have 2 girls and a boy, and especially for my girls, because I think women are so often the caregiver, and at least in my family and in my experience, good at, well, my dad does this too, sort of sacrificing, making a pattern of self-sacrifice for service to others. And there is absolute beauty in that. But when we care for ourselves, and include ourselves in that care as well as others, then there's just so much more love to go around. And, modeling that as for them, as well as being able to be more fully present for them because I'm tending to myself. Again, just has this positive feedback and this fueling, sustaining quality for myself, my own health, my relationship, my family, and then my bigger circles of working in the world.
That's beautiful. I love that. And I think that, that phrase or the concept of loving ourselves and nurturing ourselves can be almost, I don't know, glossed over. Like it's just so we hear it so much. And it's easy to just take that and go, yeah, right. I know I'm supposed to love myself, right? Versus having, the way you described it with your husband, like he's really good at loving himself and putting himself first, I thought that encapsulates it, because there is a certain energy, or some people do it really easily, as you said. And then I do think that the conditioning culturally for women is to be the caregiver and really harvest a kind of free labor, whether it's physical labor or emotional labor from women, that doesn't have cost or value, or compensation, and becomes a place where women reflexively put their needs aside and offer up service. And as you said, there's an element to that is noble and beautiful, but there's another element of it that is detracting and can make women feel invisible in who they are because they keep putting that aside to be of service. And so it's lovely that you identified that and had this shift in yourself. And
I think one other part of that is worth mentioning, and I definitely have had that pattern that you described, especially after becoming a mother. I think it's so easy to, launch into the day caring for your, needs and just getting into relationship with these beautiful beings that come to us. And then also in my work, as a healer and in training, sort of being in patterns of sleep deprivation and sort of extreme lack of self-care. But what comes up with that, and what was big for me, I think, is forgiving these patterns of self-betrayal and of being hard on myself. Because once we realize, oh, why, I'm responsible for this. I've made all these little micro choices that have led to, a life that's out of balance, or health issues that need to be healed, or just a lack of pleasure, not living in this space until I'm, in my 40s, or, whatever it is. I think once we do shine that light and start loving and start engaging in the relationship, and especially in the, the self-pleasure and the actively sexually loving ourselves, that the blocks that have come up for me have been a lot of accepting and forgiving myself and the choices I've made, and then trying to do things differently, and realizing, just like learning to meditate, realizing when I've strayed off that path, and then gently forgiving myself again and coming back. And that's okay, and that happens. But the more I celebrate, the more I'm able to see that and make a different choice, even in big things and in little things.
I like what you said about the micro choices that lead you down a path, and especially with the idea of self-betrayal. Like every time that we say yes to something that we want to say no to, or we say no to something that we want to say yes to, and then that creates this pattern, reinforces this energy of self-betrayal versus the choices we can make that self-honor, right? And then getting comfortable with, and I think that's the thing that gets taught to women, is to put aside that voice and ignore it. And that's where I think even that conditioning around calling women bitches, right? Like, she's a bitch, like, what, because she stands up for herself? Like, I mean, there's different definitions of what that word can mean for people in different circumstances, but I think there is kind of a negative connotation out there for a woman who will stand up for herself and, take what she wants and be who she is. And there might be ways in which people do that it feels overpowering or domineering, but there's a healthy way of doing it that could be applauded and celebrated. And I think women have to push for that reality to happen more so than men do, for sure.
And I think that when it comes out of a place of true love, self-love, as well as love for the other person there, and just honesty, it doesn't have that irritating energy as much. And when it comes from a place of insecurity or aggression, then I think it shapes us. It just like the feelings feel to the person having them. We share them like that.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I agree with that too. So a couple of things that you had talked about, as I talk about symptoms in the physical body being reflection of some kind of inner disturbance. And so if women are experiencing things like yeast infections or PMS, that those aren't just random physical things that happen to us, like, just whatever, but that they're an indication from the higher self that there's some way that we're living or making decisions that's out of balance. And rather than the Western approach of just trying to dominate the body and suppress those symptoms and look at them as just part of life, and we need to ignore them or deny them or suppress them, that we look at them as messages from the higher self to say, okay, where do I need to shift my focus or acknowledge myself, as we've been talking about. So you had experiences with both of those symptoms, and how did that shift for you?
I think it feels all like a continuum to me. And the symptoms are just as you say, the messages from the body that there's something that we're not seeing, that there's something going on there. It's like a call for attention and integration. And I think I'm pretty good at ignoring my body, or sort of tuning out and dividing my attention from pain or fatigue or things like that. And to an unhealthy level, I think those have been really useful skills for me to build and to use, but I've over applied them. For sure. And I think we had spoken before about yeast infections. And for me, that's a very clear sign now. And, will have been a difficult issue for me in the past. And at times will come back. And I almost, not quite, but almost can smile at them and welcome them back. Don't quite enjoy them enough to do that yet. But as just a reminder that I'm not listening to myself, and I'm not, I'm not tending myself. I'm not resting enough, or, taking good care of myself, that I've sort of been too inspired or sometimes positively, sometimes negatively, out of a sense of feeling I should, for whatever reason, gone too far, overextended myself too far. Those two things, not loving myself, and I think other feelings. Sometimes if there's a problem in our relationship, something I've been upset about that I've not brought out, which I think we're pretty good at doing. And I think your, advice for couples in that is really been helpful for us. But it's harder with myself. I think I'm much easier. It's much more common that I'll get in a negative pattern with myself than I will with my partner. A bigger experience for me has been in healing chronic illness. I had Lyme disease for, embarrassingly, as a healer, for years before I really understood what was part of that, and had been really very sick with it for a big chunk of my life, and waxing and waning with ups and downs. And again, the big themes to me and big helpers have been turning that, including myself in my love, and prioritizing my own joy and pleasure and fun with all the other things that I kind of thought were more important. And I think that's at this point, and I suspect I have more to learn about this in this journey, but I think that's probably the biggest factor that made me susceptible to getting sick in the first place, and that prevented me from healing fully. And that still kind of, weakens me. And kind of catches me down.
And how would you, in one sentence, what would you say that is?
Not loving myself, or not including myself in my love, in the love and the care that I offer others around me.
Right. And how would you say that the PMS, like what would be the interpretation for you of what that was?
Being underfucked. Easily.
Okay.
I think I get a little PMS if 4 days pass. 4 days of the thing. It used to be Thursday morning. If it hadn't been, if we hadn't made love since the weekend, Thursdays would be a really hard day. And if it was, a Thursday PMSing, there would be, I think especially if I was around my husband, if we aren't around, I felt like I could sort of suppress it. But as soon as we got together, it would sort of that vibrating energy. And I think that's, there's an energy there to me, of not feeling loved enough. And again, it's that I think that's been a big reflection of me not loving myself enough, more than him not loving me enough, and taking responsibility for that is a big game changer in our relationship. So that I'm not, I'm not reflecting this all onto him, but owning it, and loving myself, like not sort of needing him to do it all for me and sort of be my savior, but being my own.
So. Yeah, beautiful. I love it. So putting all that together, how would you say then that as you have become aware of and inhabited your sexual energy more, that you've seen, obviously you've just described places in your outer life where you've seen these changes, but I know there's specific places where you've talked about making different decisions and really channeling your creative energy out into your world and different life path decisions that you've made. So tell us more about that. Because you talked about you're now homeschooling your children, you are building community outside of the system, you are building a new home.
Mm-hmm. So I think that the sort of creative project, or the creative expression that most interests me now, is this idea of manifesting our reality. And I think I always was interested in that, but where it really became a priority was, again, in becoming aware of how those sort of micro choices were, and thought patterns and feelings were manifesting in my outer world, and taking some, responsibility for that, and shifting that more consciously, and kind of turning my inner dialogue into intentions, and sort of into a conscious creative process. And I think those manifest, I think, most readily to me in my health. That's one that I see a lot, and in the health of my children and my family, and our practice and our community. I think this is a time in the world when a lot of people have been able to change, willingly or unwillingly. I think initially when the COVID shutdown happened, it was a big pause button, and we all got to see, to sort of pause how we were living. And for me, it was a great opportunity to see what we wanted to do differently. And the biggest surprise that I had there, that I hadn't expected, is how much I love having my kids at home. I had never previously been excited by the idea of homeschooling. And, after that slowly began learning about it. You had a podcast with Dana Martin, and that also, opened that pathway for me, and got me into exploring that. But the biggest surprise and moment of realization was how much of my kids' lives I was missing, that I might never have known or realized. And then at the same time, how little of the time away that they spent was learning, and was sort of, quality good time. And then how much negative effects that was happening on our time together and the time in the family. Whether it's, rushing through the evening to get them on bed on time, or waking them up and rushing them out the house. And all this rushing and all this, recovering from what happened before and preparing for what was coming next. Instead, what we got is all this beautiful time in the present together. And, initially from remote schooling, seeing, my daughter, who is 12 now, said it. I am learning so much more than I was at school in just 2 hours a day. And, remembering, I actually found my journal from when I was 12 too. And just this remembering of how much time was spent waiting and kind of wasted in my life at that time. And how that really was the beginning of learning to live my life on other people's terms and ignore what I wanted to do or squash the things that were most important to me into these small chunks of time in my day, instead of being able to explore and dive deep and luxuriate in them, which, came occasionally on vacations and other times. As having planned retreats or conferences or at times for, classes and courses for adults mostly, thought about, well, okay, we have the opportunity to design our lives and design our education and design our schedules instead of responding to, how we think we should plug into the world around us. And since we do have this chance, and, initially it was a necessity, how could we do it optimally? And what a wonderful opportunity to have. And that's continued over the last few years to just develop and deepen. I think we were part of a Waldorf school that was really lovely in so many ways and had a lot of lovely community there. But being able to sort of plug into that so easily, I think, relieved us or robbed us of the opportunity and the necessity of creating our own community and finding out, our own networks and our own connections and our own resources and our own spaces to gather and, all of those things. And it's been really, I think, just a beautiful opportunity to be able to create those and, take what we've learned and keep some things the same and change other things. And it just continues to feel like such a blessing. I'm currently, working outside of the home much less than I ever have, hardly at all really, but spending a lot of time with my kids and other kids, their friends, and sort of supporting them in their endeavors in the world. And I think in a time where people, I hear a lot of people feeling kind of pessimistic for various reasons about how things are going, and spending time with these kids, and teenagers is so, it gives so much hope and optimism. There's so much creativity and beauty and just freedom, when I get sort of stuck thinking something's a problem, to see how they breeze through it and just have a totally new idea that is so simple and so brilliant, at the same time, is just so much fun and so inspiring and gives me such a sense of peace and confidence in the future.
That's lovely. And so a couple other aspects where you're manifesting change. You talked about building a new home and then also taking a break from your medical practice.
Yeah. So I'll also say that we did finally, I think, to me in a way, somewhat logically and somewhat symbolically, I think, having or buying or building a home became connected to having our first sex retreats or honeymoon trip. And there are two things that just weren't working out for not very obvious or clear reasons. Just hadn't worked. I think when I had sort of been aware of your work from when I first had my baby about 12 years ago, or even before that, got interested in the conscious birth movement. But I really started digging in and following after your podcast about the sex vacation. And from then until about a year ago, I had 2 or 3 trips that we planned and scheduled and just sort of fell apart at the last moment. And I knew that this was symbolic of other things and was very frustrated about it. And at the same time was kind of curious about why sort of attempts at having a more permanent home. We're renting a home that's really lovely and wonderful in many ways, but was kind of, we've outgrown it as we've been here for much longer than we planned, and have outgrown it, and isn't right for our needs in the long term. And that there was a night in that trip where we had towards the end of the trip, when we had a lot of wonderful orgasms and times connecting, and had worked through a layer, a good deep layer of issues that were between us. And then again, we're in a really connected place and had shared some of our intentions underneath a waxing moon rise on the beach one night. And those intentions were all super powered, and coming out of that place and our togetherness manifested within the next month and have continued. And one of them, which sort of felt like the most almost superficial of them, was to have a new home. And the way that all just happened with such ease, manifested in a way that was even better than I could have expected or hoped for. And others was, at that time, our kids were still at least one of our kids was still in school. And I forget exactly what the intention was, but I had been, thinking we were pretty sure we were going to homeschool, and that we would be able to, manifest not only a strong curriculum and, balance between unschooling and kind of curriculum and support for learning and community for our kids. And that's also just manifested. I think their social life and their interaction with the world outside has been so much stronger since we've been homeschooling than it was when they were at school. And again, I think it's because those things aren't being forced on them in a time when they would rather be in bed. They're clear expressions of what they want, and what they're interested, how they're interested in connecting and learning and creating with others and meeting others and collaborating in the world. Another one was, I think, something like, for my health to feel at home in my life and in my body. And, after a many-year journey of ups and downs with health, has been just so much stronger and easier since then. So, I think in many ways that one might not think is, an expression of sexuality or sexual play, affects our life. I think part of this that maybe I didn't mention is your teaching and your suggestions of thinking about showing up ready to make love. And I think that that's a big connection for me between your work, my sexual practice, and the rest of life. And that's with my husband, with myself, and with life. And to me, that represents bringing all of me to everything. When I make love, I I feel like I need to be fully present, but in other areas of my life, I feel like it's been normal and preferable to kind of leave my sexuality behind. And when I feel like I bring that with, it's a way of helping me be whole and integrated, and avoiding these patterns of dissociation and separation, or acting how I think I should, or being who I think I should for somebody else. And I think that this allows me to, I'm sorry, I think I'm kind of losing my train of mind here. I'm starting to ramble.
I think, no, it's been pretty coherent. It's just, I'm not sure where you're going just in this last section, but, what you were talking about with your own health was clear. And then I loved what you said about you guys as a couple having these extended sex dates, and the power really of extended sex dates, where yes, there's more pleasure and more connection. But when I talk about the dimension of sexual energy being creative power, and the more extended sex that we have, the more marathon sex, 3-hour sex dates, the deeper we can get into that power. And what you described about being under, was it the waxing or the waning moon? Waning moon. And
the waxing, waxing. Just between new and full.
Great, going into the full moon. Then and then being aware that speaking those intentions to each other and being in that really charged place where you are super deeply connected, you've come out of hours of gourmet sex and having that really sacred space with each other, and then the power of that, the creative power of that. And that is one of the biggest messages that I strive to communicate to people, is that yes, I'm all about having sex for pleasure, and it's fun and it's great. But it's also this creative power of the universe literally at your fingertips. And what you're describing is you guys tapping into that, and then how quickly these things manifested in your outer life when they were sourced from that place of very deep, intimate connection.
It's really phenomenal.
It is. It's a phenomenon. Absolutely. So look, I think you've described that really well. And is there anything you want to talk about in terms of your work and that process?
Well, I think I don't really know where that's going yet. Yeah. And, what I said to you before about is kind of new feelings that I don't, I feel like there's a part, I've got part A and I don't know what the other parts are, but just feeling like there's a lot of kind of learned behavior and patterns of really not showing up ready to make love, and wanting to shift those, and kind of trusting that my self-care and healing and sort of time dedicated to myself, which has always seemed like a very selfish choice, would actually enable me to be of greater service and to help, to help be, something I strive to be, and I feel like is one of my purposes here, is to be a portal of healing for myself and others, and to kind of help this world in this time of transition, or through this time of transition. And that, I now believe that can only come through, bringing my whole self along, and coming from a place where I feel like I'm ready and able to make love, and to have my heart be open, like a big cervical orgasm, heart open, in all my moments, and not just segregated into one small area. And I feel like once that when I have been able to be in that space, then the ease of manifesting and helping in that way, with my family and my community and my patients, which feel like the same thing, is so much easier. There's no work or striving involved. It just flows.
So you're describing this energy of being open to the world, open to making love to the world, right? So it's a sexual openness, but that extends out into how you interact with the world in general. There's a level of openness and receptivity that then makes you a greater creative vessel and channel.
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely. And I think if I'm not whole and acting from that place of wholeness, then how can I help others get there? And, that can be with my partner, sure, but with my children and with my friends and with my patients and with, my kids' friends, I think when I'm able to be in that state of oneness, that helps everybody, that helps me see the oneness and the wholeness and the health in them. And I think that in of itself helps them see it in themselves too, and helps us experience it together.
Beautiful. So is there anything else that you'd like to add that you feel we haven't covered?
I think when I look at my shyness still in talking about sex and self-pleasuring, I think it comes from this conditioning, cultural or religious or familiar, wherever it comes from. For me, I don't think I have much of sex is bad in me, but I do have that it's not important or not that worthwhile or frivolous. And even the word masturbating, like it's sort of a wasting of energy and resources and not, real work and real service. And I think that's the last thing that can be true. And that when we can use our sexualities as a vehicle for our healing and to tend to those areas. When we ignore them, then they still affect the rest of our lives in ways that just aren't as healthy and conscious. And they reflect the state of our sexuality. And when that's sort of ignored and suppressed and dissociated, then that shows up in areas in the rest of our lives too, of course, as you say. And that these parts aren't, it's not just that they're a part of us that's healthy and good and nice, but that they're a crucial part of us. It's like the car, the engine in the car, or our womb. These are absolutely essential aspects to be on board in any healing question, no matter what the problem is. Certainly if it has to do with, our sexual organs or reproductive organs, but in really any aspect of our lives. It's a crucial, fundamental, beautiful, powerful a priority in our healing. And there's not that many people or teachers of how to how to go about this. And you do it so beautifully and so wonderfully, and I think make work that's really hard easy, and maybe not easy, but accessible, and break it down into simple steps, and have really, have really done the hard work and made it easy on the rest of us to kind of, follow behind you. And it's hard for me to imagine situations in which it's not beneficial for people to do this work. So I would encourage anybody listening to take a dive in and explore.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rose, for sharing. And I know you said that you still have some shyness, and you did beautifully to express these deep concepts.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity.
My legendary Vaginal Kung Fu Salon is now open for registration until Friday, February the 4th at midnight PST. In this 8-week online salon, I have compiled the best of my 30 years of sexual and vaginal experience to take you over the edge into a lifetime of bliss. We cover everything that I've talked about in today's episode, from yoni massage to how to use the jade yoni egg to activating your feminine energy as the receiver and attractor in your life, all of which bring you into your creative genius. You will learn how to have a toned, orgasmic, and ecstatic vagina, how to channel your sexual energy into creative power, step-by-step instructions for your vaginal weightlifting practice, thereby placing yourself in the running for the Guinness record for world's strongest vagina. There is one winner of that, actually. My guided routine for giving yourself or having your partner give you a healing and activating yoni massage. And last but not least, how to give your man a hand job with your vagina. Come to kungfuvagina.com. Thank you so much for listening. If you haven't already, subscribe and also leave a review. And send someone else the gift of a healthy libido and an off-the-charts love life by sharing this episode with them. We'll be back next week, and in the meantime, many happy orgasms.